This is how winners think. Winners embrace reality, however harsh. They don't flinch. They don't sugarcoat. They ask what is true, and not what is comfortable, not what is popular. They're allergic to delusion. They play the long game. A winner's gaze stretches beyond the next hour, the next day, even the next decade. They ask, what end is truly worth aiming for? And then they proceed, step by deliberate step, without rushing. Winners learn relentlessly. The best minds are permanently under construction. They read obsessively. They listen carefully. They steal wisdom like magpies from mentors, from mistakes, from every corner of life. They are calm when others panic. There's a quiet inner stillness that defines the greats. It's not that they don't feel fear, they've simply trained themselves to respond rather than react. Winners cultivate an internal scorecard. They're not chasing applause. They're not optimizing for envy. They measure themselves by values, not vanity. Integrity, discipline, kindness, these are the metrics that matter. They turn pain into fuel. Adversity is not a detour. It's the crucible in which character is forged. Winners don't avoid hardship, they metabolize it. Winners think independently. They resist the seductive pull of the herd. They ask, does this make sense? Instead of, is everyone else doing it? True thought, they know, is rare and powerful. They focus on what they can control. Energy is finite. Winners don't waste it on gossip, outrage, or luck. They pour it into habits, preparation, and the choices within their grasp. They serve something larger than themselves. Whether it's building, teaching, healing, or creating, their ambition is tethered to contribution. They rise not for ego, but for impact. They stay humble. Always, even at the summit, winners understand they are fallible, temporary, learning. Arrogance is a liability. Curiosity is a compass. They begin with brutal honesty, not because they enjoy discomfort, but because they know that clarity is power. While others turn away from facts that sting, winners lean in. They understand that the sooner they see things as they are, the sooner they can do something about them. There's no growth in pretending. When things go wrong, and they often do, winners don't indulge in blame or fantasy. They ask hard questions. What did I miss? Where was I blind? They dissect the failure without flinching, not to punish themselves, but to illuminate the truth that lives beneath the surface. They're wary of hope that isn't earned. False optimism is seductive but dangerous. It whispers, everything will be fine, without demanding the work that actually makes it so. Instead, winners ground themselves in what is, and build from their brick by honest brick. Delusion is a luxury they can't afford, not in investing, not in business, not in life. They've learned that self-deception always extracts a price often hidden at first, but exacting in the end, so they make a practice of seeing clearly, even when it's painful. They don't chase feel-good narratives. They'd rather have an accurate map than a comforting story. Even when the map reveals rough terrain, they prefer its honesty. It lets them navigate, adjust, survive. Denial, on the other hand, leaves you lost. There's a deep discipline in how they think. They pause before reacting. They examine their biases. They ask, what am I missing? Where am I fooling myself? This self-inquiry isn't weakness. It's a quiet form of courage, the kind that lasts. Winners resist the temptation to explain away setbacks with easy answers. They know that insight lies on the far side of discomfort. And so they sit with it, they reflect, they question their assumptions. They don't need the world to flatter them. The habit of facing facts extends inward. They hold a mirror to themselves, not to admire, but to see. They don't inflate their strengths or excuse their flaws. They're accountable, radically so, and because of that they're adaptive. They change when change is necessary. They've seen what happens when people refuse to face reality, the denial, the delay, the collapse. So they build their lives on truth, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. For them, truth isn't a concept, it's a discipline, a way of operating. This kind of clarity doesn't happen by accident. It's cultivated through reflection, through pain, through experience. Over time, it becomes a kind of instinct. They feel when something's off and they investigate, because they know the truth might hurt but lies kill. They understand that real success is rarely immediate, while the world obsesses over short-term wins, quarterly earnings, viral moments, instant gratification. They think in decades. They're patient, not because it's easy, but because they know that time, properly used, is the ultimate edge. Their decisions reflect a deep sense of purpose. Before they act, they ask, will this matter in 5 years, in 20? If the answer is no, they let it go. This clarity allows them to focus on what endures, not what's loudest or most urgent in the moment. They build slowly, intentionally. There's no rush to prove, no panic to outperform. Each step is part of a design, not a scramble. They understand that consistency compounds in health, in relationships, in capital, in knowledge. They trust the process. This long-term orientation requires sacrifice. It means saying no to shortcuts, even seductive ones. It means walking away from opportunities that glitter but don't align. They're willing to appear foolish in the short term, knowing that strategy often looks like stubbornness before it looks like wisdom. They're immune to the noise of the crowd. When others are chasing trends, reacting to headlines, they stay anchored to their plan. Their conviction isn't built on emotion or momentum, it's built on principle. And because of that, it endures. They measure progress differently, not by speed but by trajectory, not by applause but by alignment. They understand that growth is often invisible at first, a hidden root system that takes time to emerge above ground. And so they wait, they nurture. Their time horizon allows them to stay calm in storms. When others panic, they zoom out. They remember why they started. They remember where they're headed. This perspective creates resilience not because they're unshakable, but because they're oriented towards something bigger than today. There's a quiet confidence in how they move. It's not reactive. It's not desperate. It's composed because it's rooted in a vision. They've thought deeply about the life they want to lead, and they're willing to take the scenic route to get there. Playing the long game means choosing depth over speed, principle over convenience. It means doing the right thing even when no one is watching, trusting that integrity, too, compounds over time. They know the world may not reward patience right away. It may not understand restraint, but they don't mind. Their reward isn't applause, it's the quiet satisfaction of knowing they stayed true to the arc they chose. And the life they're building is one that lasts. There's a deep humility in how they approach the world, not the performative kind, but the real thing, a recognition that no matter how much they know, it barely scratches the surface, so they stay curious. They stay hungry. Every day is an opportunity to sharpen, refine, evolve. Books are not just pages to them, they are portals. They don't read to impress, they read to understand, to stretch the limits of their thinking, to download decades of insight into days. They are collectors of wisdom, not for decoration, but for transformation. They treat every conversation like a classroom. When they meet someone who's walked a different path, built something great, survived something hard, they lean in. They listen more than they speak, because they know insight can come from anywhere if you're paying attention. Failure is not something they fear, it's something they mine. They dig through the rubble of their mistakes, asking, what was this trying to teach me? To them, failure is feedback. It's the tuition for a deeper kind of learning, the kind that leaves a scar and a lesson. They seek out discomfort, not recklessly, but deliberately. They put themselves in rooms where they're not the smartest, not the most experienced. They welcome the feeling of being stretched, knowing that growth lies right at the edge of competence. Learning, for them, isn't academic, it's embodied. They don't just want to know what works, they want to understand why. And then they test it, apply it, break it, rebuild it. Their knowledge is lived, earned, scarred. They question relentlessly, not out of doubt, but out of discipline. Is this still true? Is there a better way? What am I not seeing? They're not attached to being right. They're committed to getting it right. That difference is everything. They're students of pattern. Whether it's markets or human nature or their own habits, they observe, track, and reflect. They know that excellence isn't random, it's revealed in the recurring signals that others overlook. There's no endpoint to their education, no arrival, no mastery that signals you've made it. The best of them keep learning well into their later years, not to stay ahead, but to stay awake. Because to stop learning, they believe, is to start decaying. This relentless learning isn't glamorous. It's not always fun, but it's sacred. It's how they honor the gift of time, the privilege of potential. And in the quiet hours when no one's watching, it's what they return to again and again because they know it's how the future is won. In the chaos, they slow down. While the noise around them rises, voices shouting, markets trembling, pressure mounting. They move in the opposite direction. Inward, deeper, toward stillness, because they've learned that the clearest decisions often emerge not from speed, but from silence. Fear visits them too. They are not immune, but they've developed a kind of inner spaciousness, a pause between stimulus and response. In that space, they breathe, they think, they choose. That small moment, invisible to the world, is where power lies. They've trained their minds the way others train muscles, through repetition, through reflection, through adversity. So when the ground shifts, they don't flail, they center themselves, they ask, what matters now? What is permanent beneath this storm? This calm isn't softness, it's strength, a kind of discipline forged in difficulty. They've faced losses, betrayals, uncertainty, and each time they've come back more grounded, not because life got easier, but because they learned to anchor deeper. They don't chase every headline or flinch at every fluctuation. While others spiral into speculation, they return to principle. They ask, what do I know to be true? What has worked over time? This loyalty to fundamentals becomes their lifeline. In relationships, in business, in crisis, they become the steady hand. The one others look to when tempers flare or plans unravel, not because they have all the answers, but because they carry a kind of settledness, a conviction that clarity is always available if you know where to look. They've studied history, not just to learn what happened, but to understand how people behave when fear takes over. This knowledge inoculates them. They recognize the patterns of panic, the contagion of irrationality. And so they opt out. Their calm is contagious. In tense moments, their demeanor shifts the room. It reminds others that urgency does not require chaos, that pressure does not demand panic. They become a thermostat, not a thermometer, setting the tone, not absorbing it. They know that impulse is expensive. Reacting out of fear often leads to decisions that need repairing, so they buy themselves time, sometimes just seconds, to ensure their response is thoughtful. This small delay, practiced over years, becomes a defining habit. And when it's over, when the wave passes, they reflect. How did I carry myself? Where did I lose composure? They learn from each storm, because to them, calm is not a gift, it's a skill, one they are always refining. They live by a compass, not a clock. Their sense of direction doesn't come from what others applaud, but from what feels aligned deep inside. Long before they succeed by any external measure, they've already decided who they want to be, and they measure everything against that. While the world ranks and rates and rewards, they turn inward. Did I show up fully? Did I keep my word? Did I act with care, even when no one noticed? These are the quiet questions that guide them. This is the scorecard that matters. They're not immune to praise, but they don't depend on it. Compliments don't define them. Criticism doesn't undo them. Their self-worth isn't fragile because it doesn't rest on shifting public opinion. It rests on private truth. When they succeed, they ask, was it done the right way? Not the fastest way, not the most profitable, but the way that honors their principles. They've seen too many people win at the wrong game and lose something far more important in the process. Integrity isn't a performance to them, it's a posture, a way of being that holds even when it costs, even when it's lonely. They understand that character is invisible, but not inconsequential. It shapes outcomes over time in ways applause never can. They respect ambition, but only the kind that serves something higher. They've seen how empty it feels to climb ladders that lean against the wrong walls. So they climb carefully, deliberately, and always with an eye on why. They admire the unflashy virtues, patience, humility, generosity, not because those traits get attention, but because they build substance. And in a world obsessed with impressions, they're more interested in impact. Their inner scorecard helps them navigate when things get murky, when the rewards are unclear, when the crowd turns, when doubt creeps in. They return to their values. It's their way of staying steady in a landscape that constantly shifts. They remind themselves, the world remembers headlines, but the soul remembers choices. So they protect the part of themselves that only they can see, the part that knows when they took the easy way out, or when they stood tall in the dark. And in the end, they sleep well, not because everything went right, but because they answered to something real, something honest. The applause fades, the numbers blur, but the person they became along the way, that's theirs to keep. They don't romanticize suffering, but they don't run from it either. Pain to them is a teacher blunt, uninvited, and often unwelcome but wise. When hardship knocks, they don't ask why me, they ask, what is this trying to show me? They understand that pain isn't the opposite of progress, it's often the path. Loss, rejection, failure, these aren't setbacks in their story. They're chapters, sometimes the most defining ones, not because they enjoyed them, but because they refused to waste them. Where others get bitter, they get better. Not immediately, it still hurts, but eventually. They take their wounds and work with them. They extract meaning from the mess. They build muscle where others build resentment. It's not magic, it's discipline. Pain sharpens them. It cuts through illusion. It reveals what matters, what lasts, what's real. In the fog of comfort, it's easy to forget. Adversity clears the view. It forces focus. It strips away the noise, and in that silence they find strength. They carry their scars with pride, not shame, because each one tells a story of something they faced and didn't flee. They've been through fire not unscathed, but unbroken, and now they walk with a quiet kind of credibility, the kind that can't be faked. They've learned that what breaks most people isn't the pain itself, it's the resistance to it. So they don't numb, they don't distract, they sit with it, let it do its work, let it teach what only pain can teach, empathy, patience, perspective. In their darkest moments, they don't collapse, they reframe. They ask, how can this serve me? What strength is this asking me to develop? They don't pretend it's easy, but they believe in alchemy, turning struggle into growth, grief into gratitude, pain into purpose. They draw energy from what others discard. Every failure, every misstep, every time they were counted out, it becomes fuel. Not the kind that burns hot and fast, but the kind that sustains. The kind that pushes them to show up again and again and again. They know that adversity doesn't build character on its own. It reveals it, it demands it. And they meet the demand sometimes barely, sometimes bravely, but always with the commitment to rise, not retreat. So when life gets hard, and it always does, they lean in, not because they love the pain, but because they trust what's on the other side of it. Growth, depth, wisdom, and a strength that no easy life could ever offer. They've trained themselves to pause before following. In a world that rewards conformity and punishes doubt, they carve a different path. Not to be contrarian for its own sake, but because they know real thinking requires distance from noise, from trends, from groupthink. When a crowd runs in one direction, they stop and ask, why? Not cynically, but critically. They understand that consensus is not the same as correctness, and that history is filled with moments where the majority was loud and wrong. They carry a quiet reverence for independent thought. It's not flashy, it's not always popular, but it's honest. It's earned through solitude, through reading, through long walks and longer questions. This is how they cultivate clarity in a world full of echo. Their decisions are rooted in principle, not popularity. While others seek approval, they seek understanding. Does this align with my values? Does this make long-term sense? These are the filters they use even when they lead to uncomfortable conclusions. They're willing to be misunderstood. That's the cost of original thought. At times, their choices confuse others. But they don't need to explain everything. They trust time. They trust process. And they know the clarity of Heinz. It always arrives late. Their independence is not arrogance, it's responsibility. They refuse to outsource their thinking, especially in moments that matter. Whether it's money, ethics, or identity, they take ownership, because they know the price of borrowed belief is regret. They're open, but not porous. They listen deeply, but filter ruthlessly. Just because a voice is loud doesn't make it wise. Just because a person is credible doesn't mean they're right. They're respectful, but ultimately they decide. They find comfort not in agreement, but in alignment. When their choices reflect their thinking, their values, their deeper goals, that's enough. Applause is optional. Congratulation is unnecessary. They're anchored from within. They protect their mental space with care. Too much exposure to trends, to panic, to hype it clouds judgment, so they step back. They unplug, they journal, they ask harder questions. This solitude is not retreat, it's a return to center. And in the end, they trust that originality has gravity, that the world eventually notices those who dare to think for themselves. But even if it doesn't, that's fine, because for them, the highest reward isn't recognition, it's the peace of knowing they thought clearly and lived accordingly. They've learned the difference between noise and signal, between what matters and what merely distracts. Their attention is a precious resource, and they treat it that way. When the world pulls them in every direction, they return to one question: what can I actually do right now? They don't chase outcomes, they shape inputs. Outcomes are unpredictable, affected by timing, luck, the behavior of others, but inputs, those are sacred. The hours they train, the books they read, the conversations they nurture, the promises they keep, that's where they focus. They don't indulge in the theater of outrage, not because they're apathetic, but because they're strategic. They know that anger without action is a trap, a false sense of agency. So instead of venting, they build. Instead of reacting, they recenter. You won't find them refreshing the news in a spiral or obsessing over the behavior of others. They've made peace with the fact that some things are simply outside their influence. And rather than waste energy resisting that truth, they use it to master their response. When adversity strikes, they don't blame the weather, the market, or the mood of the crowd. They scan for leverage. What can I adjust? What can I strengthen? What can I let go of? They meet uncertainty with focus, not flailing. Their routines are sacred not because they're rigid, but because they're rooted in intention. Each habit is a vote for the person they want to become. Each repetition is a reminder. Change doesn't begin with the world. It begins with them. They understand that consistency beats intensity, that showing up, even on hard days, matters more than bursts of inspiration. So they show up with their craft, with their values, with their effort, not because they feel like it, but because they've decided to. They resist the urge to compare, to wonder why someone else had an easier road. It's not that they don't notice, they just don't dwell. Envy is energy misspent. They'd rather reinvest it into something they can shape, their mindset, their habits, their work. Their calm comes from this orientation. They don't need control over everything to feel steady. They just need to honor the space they do command, and over time, that space expands not through force, but through focus. This discipline, this clarity, it becomes their edge. While others spin in cycles of frustration and distraction, they move quietly, deliberately, not faster than everyone else, but clearer, and in the end, that difference compounds. They understand that greatness isn't a solo act. It's a conversation, a legacy, a ripple. Their vision stretches beyond personal gain to something bigger, a cause, a community, a future they want to shape. They see themselves as part of a larger story. Their ambition isn't a hunger for fame or fortune, but a call to meaning. They ask, how can what I do lift others? This question grounds them when the spotlight fades, when applause is absent. because impact outlasts ego and purpose sustains effort. They show up with generosity, whether it's sharing knowledge, mentoring quietly, or building systems that outlive them. Their actions are acts of giving. They understand that service isn't weakness, it's a form of strength, one that connects and empowers. Their work carries intention beyond the bottom line. They care about how what they create touches lives, improves conditions, or opens doors. They reject the empty chase of accolades and instead anchor themselves in significance. Even in competition, they hold space for others. They don't see success as a zero-sum game. They know that helping others rise doesn't diminish their own journey, it enriches it. Their networks, their relationships, their collaborations reflect this spirit. They carry humility alongside ambition, because true service requires humility, the willingness to listen, to learn, to put others before self. They're not seeking validation. They're seeking resonance, the feeling that their efforts echo beyond themselves. When challenges arise, this larger purpose sustains them. It reminds them why the work matters, even when it's hard, slow, or lonely. The cause becomes a well they return to when personal motivation wanes. They recognize that their talents are gifts, and gifts come with responsibility. This awareness shifts their mindset from entitlement to stewardship. They ask not just what can I get, but what can I give? Their legacy isn't just in results, but in the lives touched, the ideas sparked, the hope ignited. They measure success not by trophies, but by transformation in themselves and in others. In the quiet moments when no one's watching, they know their truest reward is the knowledge that they've served something worthy, and that's a power that no setback can take away. They carry their victories lightly, never letting success inflate their sense of self. They know that every peak is just a vantage point, not a final destination. There's always more to learn, more to understand, more ways to grow. They're aware of their limits, and that awareness keeps them grounded. They don't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, they ask better questions. Their humility opens doors to new perspectives and insights they might otherwise miss. Mistakes don't shame them, they teach them. They own their failures without defensiveness, recognizing that fallibility is part of being human, part of being alive. This honesty makes them approachable and adaptable. They resist the temptation to rest on past laurels. Success isn't a birthright, it's a responsibility to keep improving. Even when others praise them, they look inward, evaluating what they still don't know, what blind spots might lurk. Curiosity is their guiding star. It keeps their minds open and their hearts flexible. They pursue knowledge not to prove superiority, but to deepen understanding. This constant quest for learning fuels their resilience and innovation. They understand that arrogance isolates, it blinds, it leads to complacency, so they cultivate an attitude of listening, of absorbing, of staying teachable even when standing on top. Their humility isn't weakness, it's strength wrapped in grace. It allows them to connect authentically with others, to build trust, to inspire without intimidation. They lead by example, showing that greatness and modesty are not opposites. They know their time is finite. This awareness doesn't paralyze them. It motivates them to use every moment wisely, to leave a positive mark rather than a heavy footprint. It reminds them that legacy is built in humility. At every step, they carry gratitude for mentors, for challenges, for the opportunity to keep striving. This gratitude anchors them, reminding them that no success is solely theirs to claim. In the end, their humility is a quiet force, steady and enduring. It shapes how they see themselves, how they treat others, and how they face the future, always curious, always learning, always humble. They understand that success is less about the finish line and more about the journey, the daily choices, the small acts of courage, the refusal to be swayed by fear or crowd. It's a long game played with patience and intention, where every setback is an invitation to learn and every challenge is fuel for growth. This mindset is not reserved for the few. It's a practice, a way of living. At the core, winners serve something larger than themselves. Their ambition is tethered to contribution, to making a difference that outlasts their own moment in the sun. They move with humility, aware of their fallibility and open to continuous learning. This combination of confidence and curiosity keeps them evolving, keeps them alive to what's next. Their calm in chaos, their focus on what they control, and their independence of thought create a kind of quiet strength that's difficult to imitate. It's a strength born not from dominance, but from self-mastery. And that mastery is available to anyone willing to embrace discomfort, reflect deeply, and commit relentlessly. So when you look at winners, don't just see the trophies or headlines. See the mindset beneath the subtle, consistent, disciplined way of thinking that carries them forward. That mindset is the true victory, and it's one anyone can cultivate, starting with a single question: how will I think today?